First up, we have strikes to talk about. Action and strongly intended action.
We've been at the bargaining table for 11 months, and it took this action to have the district actually take us seriously in negotiations. And so we're standing strong and making sure that San Francisco memorializes this experience by writing strike on the beach.
Congratulations to the United Educators of San Francisco, who reached a tentative agreement with the district Friday. According to their release, throughout months of bargaining updates leading up to the historic teacher strike this month, we engaged in a prolonged contract fight as we continued negotiations for almost a year to address issues critical for students and staff, including fully funded family health care, improved educator pay, and a special education workload model, while also advocating for protections like sanctuary schools and housing support for students and families. The district repeatedly failed to move meaningfully on these priorities, with one update saying its latest proposals were contingent on increasing our class sizes and cutting existing benefits, site funding, pay, and staff. We declared the district's failure to move simply shows they are not serious about stabilizing our schools. After months of stalled talks and a fact-finding process, our bargaining team spent hours at the table in early February. On February 11th, we waited all night for a counterproposal, and the district's failure to present one was frankly shocking and absolutely unacceptable. We called again on the Board of Education and Superintendent to do what's right to settle this contract. We mobilized widespread community support, with thousands of us along with our allies walking picket lines and participating in rallies, while we repeatedly emphasized that we were prepared to stay at the bargaining table as long as it takes and urged members to continue strike actions until an agreement that met our core demands was reached. And in New York City, the massive nurses' strike is hitting a turning point, but not in the neat, tidy way hospital executives probably hoped for. Nurses at Montefiore and Mount Sinai voted by large margins to ratify new 3-year contracts, sending more than 10,000 nurses back to work. But at New York Presbyterian, nurses flat out rejected the tentative agreement and mediator's proposal, keeping more than 4,200 nurses on strike, now the largest and longest nurses' strike in the city's history. More than 50 nurses delivered a petition to the New York State Nurses Association headquarters, demanding a formal disciplinary investigation into top union leadership over members' claims that leaders are forcing a vote on a tentative agreement with New York Presbyterian that rank-and-file reps already rejected at the bargaining table. More than 1,500 nurses signed the petition in the hours after NYSNA and New York Presbyterian announced the agreement that nurses ultimately voted to reject on Wednesday. Beth Luden, a neonatal nurse and member of the executive committee at New York Presbyterian, said top union leadership informed her it was moving ahead with the vote Tuesday afternoon, days after she and the committee originally rejected it. Quote, "I can't even call it a memorandum of agreement because there's no signature on it," said Luden. "This is a rush job to get a vote out because it's in alignment with the other hospitals. It was very jarring." Luden and about half a dozen other colleagues became visibly emotional as they delivered the signed petition to NYSNA's general counsel and contract specialists who were summoned to the lobby to meet with the protesting nurses. Quote, "It's been truly painful personally that my union decided to go against my leadership and my nurses," Luden told the union's contract specialists. "We've been fighting for this for 6 months. That's rank-and-file democracy in action. This isn't just about hospitals versus workers. It's also about who unions answer to. And the deeper truth here, our healthcare system runs on burnout and moral guilt. Administrators talk about patient care while understaffing units to protect margins. Nurses are drawing a line and saying, you don't get compassionate care on the cheap." And on the West Coast, Kaiser Permanente is facing pressure on multiple fronts. More than 3,000 pharmacy and lab workers with UFCW locals just wrapped up a 3-day unfair labor practice strike, joining the roughly 31,000 nurses and healthcare professionals who have been on an open-ended walkout since late January. The UFCW bargaining committee said the strike was meant to apply immediate public pressure on Kaiser to end its unlawful behavior and return to bargaining in good faith. And they made it clear, returning to work doesn't mean backing down. Meanwhile, UHCP says Kaiser has ghosted us, with absolutely no response, not even a courtesy reply. Kaiser, of course, claims it's offered its strongest compensation package ever, with raises totaling roughly 30% over the contract. But here's the thing. Corporations always frame concessions as generosity, never as overdue restitution. When profits are up, raises are historic. When workers push back, suddenly management is shocked that people expect dignity. Now let's head out to Greeley, Colorado to look at what's been going down at the JBS beef plant. Now, if you've heard anything about this plant recently, you probably know it employs a ton of Haitian workers, many of them pretty new to the U.S., and the way they got recruited out there is questionable at best. So the union actually calls what happened human trafficking, and I mean that's not a phrase they're tossing around lightly. A lot of these folks were promised free housing before they showed up, but then wound up being charged to live in packed, barely livable spots, like the Rainbow Motel, which definitely doesn't sound like paradise based on what I've read. These workers, especially on the B shift, also got stuck doing the grimmest, toughest jobs. And to top it off, the conditions, physically brutal. Listen, the line speed for night shift, the union says it hits 440 head of cattle an hour sometimes. I can't even imagine trying to work at that pace. The A shift runs at 300, so yep, rough deal. And for a long time, there was real fear about speaking up. Didn't want to lose their jobs, or worse, face immigration consequences. Take Carlos St. Aubin, for example. He actually used another name in early reporting since he was worried about being targeted. At one point, he said he felt treated like a slave. Think about that. A guy who couldn't even close his left hand after working with a meat hook for months. Eventually, Carlos took a real risk. Went from being afraid to even be named to stepping up as a lead plaintiff in a class action against JBS. That kind of courage is something we don't talk about enough. And the thing is, even after complaints, even with that lawsuit, it's not like conditions suddenly improved. Workers told the union things actually got worse in some ways. And so you had these little wildcat stoppages happening. Folks would bang their hooks on metal workstations and let the beef just roll on by, basically forcing supervisors to pause the whole conveyor system. If that's not desperation, I don't know what is. Now all this chaos was happening while another threat was hanging over everyone's heads. The whole temporary protected status mess. Think about it. Hundreds of thousands of Haitian migrants across the country suddenly staring down the probability of being sent back because the Trump administration wanted it that way. As if the job itself wasn't tough enough. You're also waking up every day not knowing if you're about to be packed up and deported. But late at night, just before the vote, there's this judge, Ana Reyes, who hits pause on terminating TPS for Haitians. I mean, it's not permanent, but it buys a little breathing room. And you can just picture the relief. Union chat groups blowing up, people straight up celebrating. Then again, I want to stress, even union folks were quick to warn, it's a temporary reprieve. All kinds of court shit could pull the rug right back out, like we saw with Venezuelan TPS. The actual vote day, from what's been reported, was just emotional. Imagine showing up at a DoubleTree hotel across the road from your plant before sunrise, with rumors flying about unmarked ICE vans hanging around. And you're there to vote, right? But people were legit scared to even put down their name to get a ballot, worrying, if I sign in, will JBS or ICE find out? You gotta remember, that company has a lot of political connections. And here, it sounded pretty similar. Union reps promising 100% anonymity, but folks still sat for hours debating whether to trust it. Totally understandable given what's at stake. And after everything, after months of negotiations, legal scares, and all that organizing, a nearly 99% yes for a strike. When the ballots finally got counted, union reps were smiling and one of them even cracked democracy. No shit, it really was democracy in action. The symbolism of lining up, marking X's on blue ballots, watching stacks of strike votes grow while the no pile stayed tiny, it just shows the power and solidarity, especially when the odds are loaded against you. And here's the thing. If the walkout goes ahead, it'd be the first big meatpacking strike since Hormel back in the 80s. JBS is already signaling it might push back, but the unions ordered thousands of picket signs. They're not playing. Union President Kim Cordova's thinking is, look, JBS can't just yank 3,800 new people off the street to fill these jobs if the workers actually walk out. Locals aren't exactly lining up to take these jobs, she said, and it's hard to argue with that. But there's always that shadow, that immigration politics could turn on a dime. If the Supreme Court sides with the administration to kick out TPS recipients, the very people leading this fight could be gone before any win materializes. Still, the workers' overwhelming vote signals something bigger than just one workplace. It's about dignity. It's about saying, even with everything stacked against us, the threat of losing your job, your home, maybe even your status in the country, You still gotta draw the line somewhere. That's what solidarity's about, right? And this story is definitely not finished. And finally, down in Glendale, Kentucky, workers at the Blue Oval SK battery plant are still fighting Ford to recognize their union. More than 1,000 workers delivered a petition demanding Ford sit down to negotiate the future of Glendale, after months of what the union describes as efforts to undermine an NLRB election that workers already won. UAW leaders are saying it plainly. The board ruled in the workers' favor. These workers are UAW members. End of story. And let's not forget, this plant got more than $250 million in public subsidies on the promise of stable, good jobs. Well, that's your tax dollars underwriting a corporation that then drags its feet on basic labor rights. This is a scam at the heart of modern capitalism. Socialize the risk, privatize the profits, and then fight the workers who actually make the place run. All right, a bit of time travel. Rewinding to May 1st, 2006. Some of you listening might remember that day. Maybe you were out in the streets, maybe you watched it on the news, or maybe you just heard about it from someone who couldn't believe the scale. For those who weren't around or need a refresher, that was the day millions, millions, of immigrants and their allies walked out of workplaces, schools, even ports and small businesses all across America. The spark was the Sensenbrenner bill, H.R. 4437. This bill would have made it a felony not just to lack immigration papers, but also to support or even show solidarity with undocumented folks. Wild, right? That threat, though, kicked off a wave, like a real sea of resistance. In LA, numbers got crazy. The marchers just kept coming and coming, a literal river of people. Ports basically ground to a halt, while tenor restaurants and shops locked up at noon, schools emptied out. That moment, if you were working class, especially if you were an immigrant or you cared about the cause, it made you realize, yep, collective action can move mountains. In that disruption, all those people taking serious risks, it worked. The Senate felt the pressure, killed the bill, and that was a huge win for the movement. It's sort of cliche to talk about the sleeping giant waking up, but that's what it felt like. And what's even more interesting for me, looking back, is how the methods and energy from that day still echo in today's struggles, especially with ICE and the anti-immigrant nonsense that keeps popping up. It's real proof that history doesn't repeat, but it sure likes to rhyme. And something that doesn't get talked about enough is how this massive strike in '06, it wasn't just old-timers and union folks leading the way, it was youth. It was really young people who lit the fuse for everyone else. That spring, thousands of high school walkouts happened all over the country. These kids were the spark. I mean, when you're at that age, you've got less to lose in some ways, but you're also carrying your family's future on your shoulders. Plus, there's this thing with second-gen immigration youth, right? Where they feel more rooted, they know the language, and they're less scared to jump into the political fray. There was this one story about a Chicago high school kid convincing his whole family to march. At first, the parents were like, not sure, but eventually they came around. It just goes to show how organizing, real organizing, often starts at home, over dinner, with one stubborn kid keeping at it. And that pattern isn't just history, and it wasn't just walkouts. The 2006 movement got smart fast about going mainstream. Like you saw a lot of American flags at the marches, and leaders made sure the movement was visually all about family, belonging, and nonviolence. That helped diffuse all the outsider rhetoric that always gets thrown at immigrants. Churches got pulled in too. Priests and pastors, especially in LA, gave moral cover and legitimacy. It helped make newcomers feel it was safe to join, almost like a big family gathering, which is a different vibe from, say, a street protest with just hardcore activists. And that collective discipline, the commitment to keep things peaceful, coordinated, and welcoming, was what allowed for the scale. Honestly, if you want to hit pause on anti-immigration policy, you can't just speak to your own bubble. You got to reach the normies out there, folks who don't live and breathe activism. That's a lesson we keep relearning. Now, something else the 2006 strike nailed, and I'd almost forgotten how important this is, was media. Back then, Spanish-language radio was like gasoline on the fire. Two DJs, El Cusi and El Piolín. Once they were on board, they turned their shows into campaign headquarters. Once the message got out through those channels, turnout exploded. It wasn't just random virality, though. The movement put real effort into coordinating that media push. Now compare that to today. Our media world is so fractured, so many different feeds and group chats, people plugged into their own echo chambers. If we want to mobilize like in 2006, organizers can't sit around hoping some TikTok video goes viral. We need clear strategies, mapping out who's got reach, coordinating messages, getting supportive public figures to echo the call. Speaking of strategy, the 2006 movement had another edge, a clear single demand. They weren't asking for a million things. They united around no on the Sensenbrenner bill. That made it crystal clear why folks should take risks. Today, with so much happening all at once, there's a temptation to stack on a million demands, but experience keeps showing that people rally behind something winnable. Take Minnesota's recent anti-ICE actions. The demand was simple: ICE out of Minnesota. That clarity let people, families, workers, students see themselves in the fight. And then unions. That's a tough one. In 2006, unions supported logistics and staff, but they mostly stayed out of the actual strike call. Some even discouraged members from walking out, worried about backlash or losing jobs. In LA, it was actually the community-based March 25th coalition that led the charge, which kind of put the labor movement on its heels a bit. Today, places like Minnesota are kind of flipping the script. Progressive unions there have started showing up and backing these big direct actions. They aren't openly calling for strikes. They get hammered by labor law, but they're definitely not trying to stop their members from calling in sick and joining rallies. That union support gives the movement not just muscle, but legitimacy. If there's a lesson here, it's that broad solidarity, the kind that spans students, unions, faith groups, and good media strategy. That's what unlocks these big shake-the-system moments. I mean, it's daunting, but also when it works, you feel like you're part of something huge. This history, these lessons, they aren't just interesting, they're a toolkit for what comes next. That being said, something I didn't think I'd see in Texas in my lifetime, a union machinist flipping a Trump plus 17 state Senate seat in Fort Worth. Taylor Rehmet, if you haven't heard his name yet, get used to it. This guy just pulled off the kind of upset that makes you actually pause and say, wait, how did that happen? And the wild part is, he did it without the big Democratic Party machine behind him. It's more of a, well, no one's coming to save us, so we might as well do the job ourselves kind of thing. That's straight from Rehmet himself.
An upset win in Tarrant County is getting national attention ahead of the midterm elections. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Peyton Yeager. Taylor Rehmet flipped a longtime Republican seat in the state Senate. Democrats see it as momentum for other state and federal races, but political analysts are a bit more cautious. The surprise victory was a big topic today on Battleground Texas, a new daily political show on Fox Local, co-hosted by Fox 4's Stephen Dial. Stephen joins us now with a closer look. Stephen?
Peyton, Democrats are saying that this win in Tarrant County is a sign of what's to come in November, but experts say it's still too early to tell if this is a sign of a blue wave or if it's just showing that Democrats are more energized.
This win goes to everyday working people. Fresh off its upset win Saturday for state Senate, I spoke to Taylor Rehmet about what this could mean for Democrats heading into November.
I think this isn't about partisan politics. This is about folks who are struggling, finding the best candidates, because it's really people over party at this point.
Veteran and union leader Taylor Rehmet won convincingly in Saturday's runoff, beating Lee Wamsgans by 14 points, a Republican who had the endorsement of President Trump. The president himself carried this district by double digits in 2024.
We need to focus on the issues that are causing people to choose between, rent and medicine. We really need to focus on the lowering of costs in general, because they keep rising and our wages stay the same.
Rehmet says this race was about candidates. SMU political scientist Matthew Wilson believes it's about political party in the midterms.
There is just real white-hot anger against Donald Trump and the Republicans among core Democratic constituencies, and especially in off-year elections, off-cycle elections, special elections like this, that really shows.
Because this was a special election to fill a vacancy in the Senate, Rehmet will have to run again in November to hold the seat for a full term. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says this Democratic win should be a wake-up call to Republicans, but Democrats still face an uphill challenge.
I don't expect the Democratic overperformance to be to that degree in the fall elections. But it makes a huge difference. If Democrats overperform by 5 percentage points, that's a storm that Republicans can weather. If Democrats overperform by 10 to 12 percentage points, that's a different story. That could really shift the balance of power.
So even though this is a big win for Democrats, Rehmet likely will not cast a vote until he possibly wins again in November, Peyton, because lawmakers meet every other year, and so he'll still have to win for a full term in November.
So how'd he do it? He focused on stuff that actually matters. Fully funded schools, healthcare you can afford, veterans benefits, union rights. Things that touch people's day-to-day lives, not culture war nonsense. Also, he just talked to people like a normal guy. No polished, overly rehearsed pitches, just real conversations. The campaign actually trained its volunteers to listen, which, when was the last time you saw a politician do that? It wasn't the slick mailers or the campaign emails that made a difference. It was actually standing on someone's porch and asking, "What's going on with you? What do you care about?" Not just yakking at them. You could see people relax after hearing that. Like, okay, he really wants to know why my school is struggling or why my property taxes are killing me. There's just no substitute for it. Rehmet was also seriously outspent. Lee Wamsgans, his opponent, had all the Christian nationalist billionaire money you can imagine, led by folks like Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks. We're talking $2.6 million. Rehmet had just under $600,000, mostly from small donations. And yet, not only did he almost win outright in the first round, he cranked it out in the runoff with a solid 57%. Just goes to show, grassroots organizing and, listening actually work. What I think is interesting here is how Rehmet just sort of shrugged off the advice you always hear about red state campaigns. You're supposed to attack rights, play up the culture war issues, try to seem not too liberal for Texas. Rehmet had zero interest in that approach. He just said, forget the culture war. People are tired of getting wound up about whatever the outrage of the week is, when they're trying to figure out if the hospital in their county is going to even stay open. His campaign went right to the fundamentals: schools, healthcare, unions, veterans benefits. And he picked those issues by actually having conversations with voters, like actually asking people what mattered most to them and building a platform around what they heard. It's much more democratic than you usually get from political campaigns, right? The volunteers were supposed to call in if they didn't have an answer, sometimes even patching people through to Rehmet himself. I mean, can you picture most politicians taking that kind of random constituent call during a campaign? I can't. It's honestly the total opposite of the consultant-driven, one-size-fits-all script most candidates use. There's something kind of radical about just listening, and when people felt heard, they showed up. Again, his opponent had all the money, TV ads, and the party apparatus. Wamsgans, she's with Patriot Mobile, the Christian conservative cell phone company, and she ran the kind of campaign you'd expect, with the big dollar donors, the whole MAGA brand. Even with that, she couldn't match the actual conversations Rehmet's campaign was having on the ground. I might be off base here, but it's almost like the closer you get to talking about people's actual lives, the easier it gets to steamroll the pollsters and pundits and just win over folks. Small money, big turnout, real issues. That makes you wonder, how much of our politics is just missing the point, When you tune out what the folks in the consultant class or the political media say should work, and instead just, ask communities what they really want, you start to get results that surprise everyone, except the people on the ground. Maybe that's the real story out of Tarrant County. And Tarrant County isn't just some random place for this kind of upset. It's actually got a whole radical history, goes all the way back to the late 1800s. If you dig around a bit, you'll find stories of the Knights of Labor, big strikes against the railroads, and farmers linking arms with workers to take power out of the hands of the bigwigs. People's Party, labor coalitions, all that. H.S. Broyles, you might not have heard the name, but he was this machinist, a bit like Rehmet, who managed to get elected mayor of Fort Worth as part of this Dark Lantern Party, which is a pretty cool name for a bunch of working-class folks meeting in secret to dodge the bosses and political insiders. There's even this moment called the Battle of Buttermilk Switch, a literal brawl over workers standing up for their rights, where some sadly lost their lives. These folks were trying to get an 8-hour workday and convict leasing, just basic dignity on the job. And yep, even after the strikes were crushed, that wasn't the end. Farmers and laborers came together to keep pushing, even forming the People's Party, which, this surprised me, became the second biggest party in Texas. They put through real reforms, workplace protections, the Railroad Commission. These were serious material changes, all from bottom-up organizing. So when I see someone like Taylor Rehmet win, I think sure, it's a surprise. But it's not out of nowhere. This is a kind of return to form for Tarrant County. Regular folks coming together, demanding more, and sometimes actually getting it. Maybe this is one of those sparks that helps folks remember just how much power you can have when you organize across the lines that divide us and keep the focus on what really fucking matters. So when you step back and look at all of this together, the teachers forcing movement in San Francisco, nurses refusing to be rushed into a bad deal in New York, Kaiser workers walking out on the West Coast, Haitian workers at JBS in Colorado staring down exploitation and deportation at the same time, battery workers in Kentucky demanding Ford recognize a union they already won, immigrants reminding this country in 2006 what mass disruption actually looks like, and a machinist flipping a deep red Texas seat by just listening to people. You start to see the pattern. None of these fights are isolated. They're all different forms of the same struggle. Working people trying to claw back dignity in a system that's built to squeeze them, divide them, and tell them to be grateful for scraps. The through line here is solidarity and democracy from below. Rank and file workers holding their own leaders accountable. Immigrants and citizens showing up for each other. And organizers choosing real conversations over consultant scripts. Power doesn't come from polished press releases or billionaires' checks. It comes from people taking risks together, learning from past movements, and refusing to accept that exploitation is just how things are. Again, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, that rhyme sounds a lot like the working class remembering what it can do when it moves together. Well, that does it for this episode. If you like what you hear, give a rate or review on your favorite podcast app to help me grow. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with over 200 labor shows you can check out at laborradionetwork.org. This has been the Labor Force Podcast. I'm Mike Strukin. Solidarity, always.